Suicides within Taiwan's police force are highlighting a lack of mental health support.
In a new report, researchers lay out just how China used disinformation tactics to influence Taiwan's big presidential vote.
Japan ups its military capabilities, buying long-range missiles from the U.S. Plus, wind farms may be driving Taiwan's only native marine mammal to extinction. Welcome to another edition of TaiwanPlus News. I'm Leslie Liao. Thanks for joining us. The suicide of a Taipei police officer has put a new focus on the lack of mental health care for law enforcement. It's already the second suicide of a police officer this year. John Van Triest looks at the roots of this mental health problem and why it's getting worse.
This is where a 30-year-old police officer took their life on Thursday. It was a shock. This was an officer known for hard work and friendly ties with the rest of the squad. The police force thinks this was a hidden mental health crisis that reached a breaking point. This is not an isolated case. It's already the second suicide of the year in the police force, putting Taiwan on track to overtake its yearly average of 5 police suicides. Taiwan's government watchdog says the problem of police suicides is getting worse, and the age of the officers taking their lives is getting younger.
警察有他的绩效压力，有他的排班的特性，他可能3班制，所以他很容易会造成他的身心的健康上的一些风险在。在22件里面有6件都已经陷入到所谓的长期失眠的困扰。
Mental health is covered under Taiwan's national health insurance, but suicide prevention resources for the police force are underfunded.
1年能够投入在这种自杀防治的工作，它大概只有370万哈，这涵盖所有县市，包括警政署。当然，这个预算占它的整体警政署的预算来说，连1%都没有。
Officer Xiao Renhao knows well what this can lead to. A member of his police academy class is among those to have taken their lives in recent years. Xiao is now one of the directors of a group that pushes for officers' labor rights and surveys their mental health. An unusual workload last year brought the percentage of officers who said they'd considered suicide to 11%.
我们都会说，警察在工作之后，他会慢慢的跟社会脱节，就是因为他没有时间去做其他的事情。那另外一个部分就是说，警察会是一个需要比较常面对冲突的工作，会定说，就是你可能要开多少单，那你要抓什么特定的犯罪，你要查多少案件。 我们都会说它是一个很不合理的制度的原因是，我们都会说台湾是治安很好的国家。
Xiao says those who seek help aren't as stigmatized as they used to be, but they can still face consequences that can make the situation worse if they're open about it.
那就是要求你不要拿枪，但是这样其实会有很大的影响，因为我们大多数的勤务都会需要配枪，它就会变成连值班都不能值班，因为值班是要配枪的，它就只能可能顾大门，或者是做一些简单的勤务，它就会变成这个单位内跟大家脱节的人，因为他的勤务跟大家完全不一样，他会是对于工作状态有影响，你就会觉得到底是他不想工作，他偷懒不想工作，还是因为生病，就会分不清楚。
Xiao says conditions are far better than they once were, but officers continue to die. And his group wants measures like the abolition of fine quotas to help ease the pressure of the job. The National Police Agency didn't respond to a request for comment on these issues or on how it plans to improve officers' access to mental health care. And while the Control Yuan wants more spending and more counseling capacity, concrete plans for the mental health of Taiwan's 70,000-strong police force aren't yet in sight. Dolphin Chen and John Van Triest for TaiwanPlus.
China sought to amplify and leverage existing social conflicts in Taiwan through disinformation ahead of its presidential elections. That's according to a report on foreign election interference by think tank Doublethink Lab. Rick Glaudt reports.
The dust has settled on Taiwan's landmark presidential elections, but questions over how China, which claims Taiwan as its own, influenced the big vote still remain. In a new disinformation report, researchers here paint a picture of Beijing trying to persuade voters towards pro-China candidates and sow discord among the electorate.
I think the most concerning for us is that we also run the pre-election polling to see how those narratives being spread and how they be accepted by our voters. And we see that more and more the narrative is divided our society, and it is a polarization are increasing. And we also observe that more and more people are receiving those political related information from influencers, key opinion leaders instead of the traditional media.
Earlier this week, Taiwan opened a new cognitive warfare research centre, its mission to further study and combat disinformation. Opposition parties are worried the new measures could curtail free speech, but the government says it's necessary to protect the country's democracy.
我们是民主法治的国家绝对不会影响到言论自由，但是言论还是要有法律上的限制不能作为一个虚伪的假讯息的传播。
The message from researchers here is that Chinese disinformation tactics had an impact and that they're only going to increase and evolve in the future. They say Taiwan needs to better equip itself to fight this cognitive warfare battle. Leon Lien and Rick Laut in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
25 people are being investigated for spreading rumors about election fraud in Taiwan's January 13th elections. Officials say videos spread widely online alleging voter fraud are based on misunderstandings about the vote counting process. It follows calls from Taiwan People's Party Chair Ke Wen-je to improve the voting system. Ke finished third in the presidential race behind Hou You-yi of the Kuomintang and Lai Ching-te of the Democratic Progressive Party. North Korean state media says the country has tested an underwater nuclear weapon system. It's the third time the North has tested the nuclear-capable attack drone. The test took place in the East Sea, also known as the Sea of Japan. It was apparently in response to this week's joint drills by the U.S., Japan, and South Korea. North Korea's foreign minister has also just returned from a trip to Russia as the two countries build up their military ties. Japan has signed a contract with the U.S. to buy up to 400 Tomahawk missiles. Tomahawk missiles are offensive weapons launched from warships to hit targets on land. They'll help boost Japan's counter-strike capabilities. The weapons deal is considered a major shift from Japan's long-standing policy of having a self-defense force instead of a military. But due to threats from China, Russia, and North Korea, defense officials are pushing for changes in Japan's military structure. The U.S. says it could begin teaching Japan how to use the missiles in March. To learn more about why Japan is investing in Tomahawk missiles, our reporter Jaime Okan spoke to Riley Walters, a security analyst at the Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C.
This decision by Japan to buy up to 400 U.S.-made Tomahawk missiles, is this a sign of what could be a future trend in the way that Japan's self-defense forces are postured?
The purchase of the 400 Tomahawk missiles from the United States, I think it does two things. First, it shows that there's definitely a change in sentiment within Tokyo. As their new national security strategy from a year ago said, the region is probably the most worrisome it's been since World War II. And so, it's no longer just, we used to call this sort of the sword and shield, where it shows that Tokyo has really changed some of the sentiment in that it wants own capabilities that it could combine into its own forces. The second thing is it also shows sort of expedited sentiment in these concerns for these. The purchasing of the Tomahawks is really more of a filler in the meantime before Japan can start producing its own indigenous weapons, its own missile capabilities to a capacity that can meet its demands.
Now, this push to purchase these types of weapons, is this more of a United States kind of led push for Japan to acquire this sort of capability, or is this more of a sentiment within Japan to maybe adjust to the current security environment?
It's absolutely coming from Tokyo. Washington welcomes it. Washington welcomes when any country, especially those it's allied with, takes more of an initiative to boost up their own defense. But this is very much a Tokyo decision. The belligerence that we've seen out of Beijing for the last several years has really caught the eye of Tokyo. It's not just PLA planes and vessels flying around Taiwan. It's flying around and sailing around the islands of Japan as well. And so they're very worried about those developments. The sentiment in Japan is, as everyone should know, is a pacifist nation, which renounces any act of war. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have self-defense capabilities. That's why self-defense forces are called that. But it does go to show that the sentiment around this is that Japan isn't going to necessarily strike first, but that it will have the counter capabilities it needs if it were to come under attack by the PLA or North Korea or some other party in the region that threatens Japan.
This isn't the first purchase of Tomahawk missiles by a country in Asia. Australia last year was also looking to acquire the same sort of weapons. But this trend of maybe a more offensive capabilities, is this going to be something that we're going to be seeing in the Indo-Pacific region?
I think it's one element. The other thing that the Japanese released, their national security strategy, is their national defense strategy and build-up plan. And missiles is a big part of that. Missile defense is a big part of that. But other areas as well, such as new fighter program development or autonomous weaponry, it's very much leaning into the new asymmetric capability side that, a country with like Japan, where they have diminishing population, which means diminishing force size, have to ultimately rely on. And so missiles is always an important part of that, but it's not the only one.
That was the Hudson Institute's Riley Walters speaking with TaiwanPlus reporter Jaime Okan. A green energy solution may not be so green after all. Conservationists say offshore wind farming may drive Taiwan's only endemic marine mammal to extinction. Tiffany Wong has more.
Taiwanese white dolphins. There are just about 50 left of Taiwan's only endemic marine mammals, and according to some ocean conservationists, there may soon be even fewer, due to offshore wind farming. They say this green energy solution can actually cause noise pollution and encroach on dolphin habitats.
离岸风电加速开发的话，我们相信对于白海豚的保育是更不利，而且有可能会加速白海豚
Now, Taiwan's Ocean Conservation Administration is urging fishers to report any sightings of the critically endangered dolphins to help with their conservation efforts, and they can receive cash for doing so.
环境的监测更加强，然后这些废弃物的清理，我们也可以提醒作业的渔民也小心，尽量避开这些范围。
Officials hope by incentivizing the fishers to help in these efforts, communities can reap the benefits of the wind farms without endangering the dolphins. Eason Penn and Tiffany Wong for TaiwanPlus.
More and more senior citizens in Taiwan who need care are stuck living alone, many of them suffering from dementia. Joyce Tseng reports on how this trend could become even more dangerous for Taiwan's aging society.
Taking a moment to consider his actions, Mr. Wang goes about his daily routine, relying on muscle memory and some help from a volunteer caregiver. Wang suffers from dementia, and though he needs care, he lives alone, a situation not uncommon for seniors in Taiwan's aging society.
如果还可以，他们都不会想要去跟 年轻的孩子去市中心住，因为这不是他的老家，也不是他熟悉的环境。
But caregivers from the volunteer group Come Home say leaving seniors alone can be dangerous, especially for those with dementia who may leave kettles and cookers on by accident. Taiwan has over 48,000 seniors in need of care who live alone, and there aren't enough professional caregivers to look in on them. Volunteer carers step in to help out with daily tasks like taking medicine, and according to them, one of the biggest risks is seniors going missing.
你今天跟谁出来的？跟你妹妹出来的。那你妹妹人呢？
Seniors getting lost has become a growing problem. In the past 5 years, more people aged over 65 have gone missing, and a growing proportion of these cases were due to dementia. On Taipei's metro, one person is reported lost every 2 days. Over half of these cases are senior citizens. Wang has also gotten lost before, not able to find his way home after a nighttime walk.
后来有路人就去报警啊，他把警察报的那个住址跟电话都是错的。
In the end, it was this bracelet with Wang's emergency contact that helped him get home, a potentially life-saving accessory that families are now being urged to get. But what they really need is more assistance, and they're calling on the government to push harder to boost manpower and resources to care for the country's seniors. Devin Tsai and Joyce Zhen for TaiwanPlus.
U.S. basketball star DeMarcus Boogie Cousins has arrived in Taiwan with crowds of fans greeting him at the airport. The four-time NBA All-Star is joining the Taiwan Beer Leopards of the T1 League. He'll make his debut on Saturday against the TSG Ghost Hawks. Leopards CEO Johnny Chang says it's still uncertain how long Cousins will be with the team. Cousins' contract will be renewed monthly depending on the chemistry with his teammates. This is not the first time the Leopards have signed a former NBA star. Dwight Howard spent the 2022 to 2023 season with the team. Coming up after the break, a century-old craft is kept alive by a family of artisans in Singapore.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world. Charted by the freest country in Asia.
5, 4, 3, 2.
A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Ian Kavat. Taiwanese semiconductor giant TSMC.
Public buses to be electric by 2030. A mission that begins with listening.
And telling the stories of Taiwan.
In Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Drawing insight from original thinkers.
And sharing it with the world. TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. China and Togo have agreed to deepen ties. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is in Togo as part of a four-nation tour of Africa that includes stops in Egypt, Tunisia, and the Ivory Coast. Wang says Beijing will help Togo speed up its industrialization. China has been building partnerships in Africa for decades, but its relationship with the continent is undergoing a transformation. Eric Olander, editor-in-chief of the China Global South Project, says the new focus is politics, not economics.
Yeah, China's relationship with Africa is undergoing a profound change, and it's a change that's been underway for quite some time, really since 2016, when we saw the peak of lending take place in Africa. And since then, lending has really gone down quite a bit. FDI is down sharply from 11% of total FDI in the continent now to less than 3% of the total. It's fallen behind some of the other players like the US and some of the other European countries. Its trade with Africa, one of the points that everybody's always happy to tout, for the most part, is flat when you measure it against China's total global trade. In many respects, a lot of the commodities that China bought from Africa, oil, mineral, and timber, it now buys elsewhere on the Belt and Road. The China-Africa relationship today is much more in the realm of politics, and great power politics specifically, rather than economics, which has traditionally been the role that Africa's played with China up until, say, the past 4 or 5 years.
The United States says it's not at war with Houthi rebels in Yemen, and its airstrikes are acts of self-defense.
The Houthis are the ones that continue to launch cruise missiles, anti-ship missiles at innocent mariners, at commercial vessels that are just transiting an area that sees 10 to 15% of the world's commerce. The U.S. is what we are doing with our partners is self-defense.
It comes after the U.S. struck Houthi targets deemed a threat to ships and the U.S. Navy vessels in the region. The Iran-backed Houthi militia has been attacking commercial ships in and around the Red Sea since November. Sri Lanka is cracking down heavily on drugs in the country, but its efforts are drawing widespread criticism over suspected human rights violations. Reese Ayres reports.
Nothing left unturned in this police raid on a residence in Sri Lanka. They're looking for drugs, part of Operation Yuktia, meaning justice, the country's war on illegal narcotics. Over 30,000 arrests have been made since the operation began in mid-December, and some $14.5 million worth of drugs have been found. Sri Lankan authorities are looking to put an end to drug trafficking and other underworld activities, but rights groups are concerned about large-scale and targeted human rights violations.
These arrests are being made very arbitrarily. There's no reasonable suspicion. The kind of people who are arrested have lower marginalized sort of economic status. The fact that the way in which the operation is carried out, there's cavity searches, there's sort of strip searches also in public, some of it televised. It's really giving a lot of concern for human rights organizations.
Sri Lanka's so-called war on drugs is further marred by reports of forced rehabilitation programs, warrantless searches and torture, leading the UN Human Rights Commission to criticize the operation.
We are very concerned that authorities in Sri Lanka are adopting a heavily security-based response to the country's drugs problem instead of public health policies grounded in human rights.
Sri Lanka's public security minister hit back at critics, claiming the war on drugs has public support.
They can issue statements, I will not stop this operation. We will go ahead and we will do it the same way because we know that we are doing something good for the children of this country, for the women of this country, and that is why the general public is wholeheartedly with us in these operations.
With around 1,000 arrests being made each day, international condemnation of Operation Yuktia seems to be doing little to slow its progress, as Sri Lankan authorities continue to push for the total eradication of illegal drugs. Eason Chen and Reese Ayres for TaiwanPlus.
A shop in Singapore's Chinatown is one of the last places in the city making religious effigies by hand. Bryn Thomas takes a look at how one family has kept a unique tradition alive.
Carving a Buddha the old way, by hand, takes several months and a lifetime of experience. It's a skill one family in Singapore's Chinatown has mastered. They've been doing it this way for over a century, passing down the ancient skill over 4 generations. Chen Shui-Lian learned the trade from her husband, the son of the shop's founder.
结婚18岁结婚，每天就看我先生做工啦，坐在身边看啦。
Shui-Lian has stepped away from the lathe and the chisel and now helps with small tasks around the shop. At 92, she's already passed on what she knows to her son.
以后就传给他去做咯，一代一代传下去咯。
Singapore's ethnic Chinese community observe a mix of religious traditions. Serene Buddhist effigies are often found alongside snarling martial statues from Chinese folk religions. Although the diverse religious practices once made for good business, modern manufacturing and mass production techniques now dominate the market. The family shop is one of the last in Singapore still making effigies by hand, and they hope the next generation will continue the tradition.
希望是这样啦，可以他如果有兴趣就他也是有兴趣就可以这样做咯，哦，不能勉强这样啦，吼，
The Buddha shop has survived a dying industry to become a bastion of local heritage. The shop's reputation and ability to repair heirloom statues has created a new market.
The statues that we receive and which we work on
I know that they're very important pieces in the lives of our customers because maybe they went through illnesses or maybe retrenchment or bad patches in their lives, and throughout that time, these effigies were the ones that gave them the hope and the encouragement to move on.
They are both?
While seeing to the needs of Singapore's faithful, the shop owners also have an eye on the future. They offer handicraft classes to make sure the skills spread into the community and don't just remain in the family.
I do hope that we can find a system and a structure to make sure that this shop can carry on for another 100 years. I don't think we want to have that key person risk where we depend on the next generation, someone developing their innate interests, and just like I did.
By both serving and educating the community, the Sei Tian Yun Buddha Shop is laying the foundation for another 4 generations and another 100 years. Howard Chang and Bryn Thomas for TaiwanPlus.
A Moonlander has burned up in the Earth's atmosphere after malfunctioning. The US-made spacecraft re-entered Earth above Australia. It was supposed to make the first soft lunar landing by the US in half a century. The lander faced some key setbacks after launching last week, springing a leak after only a few hours in space. That's it for this edition of Taiwan Plus News. Check out our website and social media for more. Before we go, check out these sheep at Qingjing Farm in Taiwan's central Nantou County. I'm Leslie Liao. Take care, and I'll see you next time.